The Torah clearly says, from the Nile River to the Euphrates, this is the greatest proof of greater Israel. How can you answer that, Lu'ay, huh? Well, my brother, I'm actually very happy you asked someone like me because I know the Hebrew Bible very well. But before we even open the Bible, let me ask you something. How can Israel be an expansionist state when it gave away 60,000 square kilometers, more than double its own size, to Egypt for peace? I'm waiting for an answer, by the way. What a terrible expansionist country. Please use your brains. Now to the Bible. When Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt, God explicitly commanded them not to seize certain lands, including Edom, Moab, and Ammon. Ammon, which is modern day Amman, by the way. Why? Because even though those lands were geographically between the Nile and the Euphrates, they were not meant for Israel. So yes, the biblical promise was always understood as a specific land with understood borders from Yam HaMelach, the Salt Sea, to Yam HaGadol, the Great Sea, from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south. That's how the kings, judges, and prophets of Israel understood it. Now, does that mean Yehuda v'Shomron, Judea and Samaria, what people call now the West Bank, are historically part of Israel? Or ancient Israel? Honestly, yes, historically they are. But the giant fictional Greater Israel map spread by some Arab and far left Western outlets completely false. And while people obsess over imaginary Israel expansion, they ignore the real imperial project in the region, the Iranian regime. The Iranian regime and its militants in Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen. That is the real expansionist danger that should worry us all, not a fictional Israeli expansionist dream. Since the ceasefire took effect in Lebanon, many people hoped the region would finally get a chance to breathe. But peace is not just a word we say in diplomatic meetings. Peace has conditions. Peace needs responsibility. And when Hezbollah continues launching rockets and drones toward northern Israel, sending armed fighters toward Israeli positions, and even attacking UN peacekeepers, this is not the definition that Hezbollah wants to convey as resistance. It's a direct violation of a ceasefire. As an Arab Muslim, I say this clearly. Defending Lebanese sovereignty does not mean allowing Hezbollah to turn Lebanon into a battlefield. No country in the world would accept rockets fired at its cities. No army would ignore armed militants move towards its positions. And no society can build a future while weapons are hidden inside civilian life. We have seen reports of Hezbollah using ambulances, storing anti-tank missiles, and even building a deep underground command center inside a clothing store. This is exactly the tragedy of Hezbollah. It hides behind an entire state like Lebanon, and then that state pays the price. The UAE taught us that peace is not weakness. Coexistence is not surrender. Real courage is protecting civilians, rejecting militias like Hezbollah, and choosing a future where Arabs and Israelis, Muslims and Jews and Christians can live without fear. Lebanon, my dear Lebanon, deserves peace. Israel deserves security. The whole region deserves leaders who choose life over endless wars. One thing I personally admire about Israel is its decision to gradually reduce dependence on American military aid. After the 1979 peace treaty, both Egypt and Israel received military assistance from the United States. But what impressed me is Israel's message. Thank you for your support. Now we want to fully rely on ourselves. That is remarkable. Israel remains a close ally of America, but it also wants strategic independence and self-reliance. And honestly, I wish Egypt could one day do the same. Because it's not about abandoning allies. On the contrary, it's a sign of maturity and gratitude. It says to America, your support helped us build ourselves. Now we can stand stronger on our feet. That is a healthy alliance. In my opinion, military aid is not necessarily bad. It is necessary for stability and security, but should ideally be temporary, not an endless guaranteed check. Because permanent dependency can eventually influence national decision-making and strategic freedom. Strong nations should always aspire towards self-sufficiency, economically, militarily, and politically. And there is something deeply admirable about a country saying, thank you for helping me become independent. Let's speak with clarity. Anwar Gargash, UAE's president advisor, recently said, "We view Iran as a primary threat, not another country in the region, Iran, the Islamic regime in Tehran." Why did he say that? Because Tehran poses a strategic risk, not only to the United Arab Emirates, but to the entire GCC. The UAE doesn't seek war, Anwar Gargash said. "We do not want escalation, but we also refuse a fragile, fake peace that ignores real dangers." Gargash continues, "We have legitimate concerns. Iran's nuclear program, its ballistic missiles, and its drone capabilities. These are not theories. These are realities we have seen. Unlike any other sovereign nation, the UAE has the right to demand firm guarantees that such aggression will never be repeated. And yes, appropriate reparations, because peace without security is not peace. It is just a pause before the next war or the next conflict. The Middle East is changing. After this war, new priorities will emerge, and one hope remains, that the Iranian people, a great and ancient nation, will one day be free from the regime that endangers them and all of us. If Hezbollah truly wants peace, why does every ceasefire end the same way? The current ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah is so fragile. And once again, Hezbollah is the one undermining it. While Israel remains committed to the agreement brokered by the United States, it is not conducting widespread attack deep inside Lebanon or regularly striking Beirut. It can, but it doesn't. Meanwhile, Hezbollah exploits that restraint. It hides behind ceasefires, continues its activities, and keeps civilians, Israelis and Lebanese, under threat. And then came an even more revealing statement. When the Iranian president recently declared, "We will not abandon our brothers and sisters in Lebanon," he unintentionally exposed the real problem. Lebanon is not a province of Iran. It's a sovereign nation, as it should. And many Lebanese understand that Hezbollah's grip on their country has brought economic collapse, political paralysis, and endless insecurity. That is why Joseph Aoun, the Lebanese president, responded firmly, making it clear that only the Lebanese government has the authority to decide negotiations and Lebanon's future. The real story here is not Israel versus Lebanon. It is Lebanon struggling to reclaim its sovereignty from an Iranian-backed militia. The Lebanese people, the amazing Lebanese people, deserve a country led by Beirut, not a country led by Tehran. What if I told you that one of the Iranian regime's most terrifying weapons is not a missile, a drone, or a prison cell? It is sexual violence. When people discuss the regime in Iran, they often focus on nuclear ambition, terrorism, or regional aggression. And all of these are valid points. For years, there have been extensive reports of rape, threats of rape, and sexual torture being used against detainees and protesters as instruments of political repression. Following the Women Life Freedom protests, numerous women came forward with testimonies describing abuse during detention and interrogation. It's not rumor. It is not social media speculation. The United States Department of State has reported numerous cases of sexual abuse, rape, and threats of rape. Organizations such as Amnesty International and other human rights bodies have documented similar allegations. Think about what that means. A government that claims to defend morality is accused of using sexual violence against its own citizens. A government that claims to protect women is accused of terrorizing women who simply demand freedom. This is why I always say, and will always say, our problem is not with the Iranian people. The Iranian people are great people, ancient people, respected people. They deserve dignity, justice, and liberty. Our problem is with the regime that has turned repression into a system of governance. And no society can call itself just while such crimes remain unanswered, just like the crimes that are taking place right now in Iran. Why can't the world blame the Iranian proxy in Lebanon? Why can't the world blame a militia that wants to run a state within a state? Recently, Hezbollah leader Naim Qasim called on Lebanese citizens to take to the streets against their own government, not against a foreign enemy, against their own state. Lebanon reportedly filed a formal complaint against Iran, accusing Tehran of interfering in Lebanese sovereignty and dragging Lebanon into a destructive war against its will. The Lebanese president courageously said that on a CNN interview, "It is not your country, it's our country," addressing Iran.
It's not your country, it's our country.
That is a remarkable moment because Lebanon is telling the world what many have been saying for years. Iran is using Lebanon as a battlefield. And Hezbollah, which claims to be the defender of Lebanon, has chosen instead to defend the regime in Tehran. The result, and I said it before, economic collapse, political paralysis, and endless wars for ordinary Lebanese families. And every escalation brings more suffering to Lebanon itself. And until the world is willing to hold Iranian proxies accountable, Lebanon, unfortunately, will continue paying the price. What if I told you that some of the people entrusted to educate children were allegedly fighting as terrorists at the same time? A recent US investigation reportedly uncovered evidence that 101 additional staff members connected to UNRWA were affiliated with Hamas and participated in the October 7 attacks. Surprised? I'm not. According to the findings, they included school principals, teachers, security personnel, and medical workers. Some allegedly served simultaneously as battalion commanders, platoon leaders, snipers, and armed operatives with Hamas. Let it sink in. People whose mission was supposed to be education and humanitarian service are accused of participating in terrorism. The individuals identified have reportedly been referred to a US federal blacklist that would bar them from receiving American foreign aid. For years, Israel and many critics argued that Hamas had deeply infiltrated UNRWA. These findings, if confirmed, reinforce those concerns, and the investigation is reportedly expanding with additional cases under review. I'll say it loud and clear. The people of Gaza deserve humanitarian assistance. Of course they do. And the UAE helped them a lot, thanks to the Abraham Accords. They deserve schools, healthcare, and hope. But humanitarian organizations must be exactly that, humanitarian. If a relief agency is infiltrated by terrorists, it does not help peace. It undermines peace. It kills peace, because no child should be taught by someone who believes violence is a path to the future. And no donor nation should have institutions that have been compromised by extremism and radicalism. There is a single regime that has the power to raise your fuel prices, disrupt your supply chains, and threaten the global economy. Welcome to the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway carries roughly 20% of the world's oil and LNG trade, making it one of the most economic arteries on Earth. And today, Iran and its proxies are turning it into a weapon. For months, disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz have stranded thousands of ships and tens of thousands of sailors, disrupted energy markets, and forced companies to reroute trade under enormous risk and cost. And you might think, well, this is a Middle Eastern problem. It's not just a Middle Eastern problem. When Hormuz is threatened, oil prices rise in Europe. Factories feel it in Asia. Consumers feel it in America. The world economy becomes hostage to instability. And it doesn't stop there. Iran's network of proxies can also threaten Bab el-Mandab in the Red Sea. You know the Houthis, right? Another critical maritime route connecting global markets. Think about the pattern of the Iranian regime or the Islamic regime of Iran. Not building, not innovating, not creating prosperity, but using strategic checkpoints as tools of coercion. This is why the issue is bigger than Israel, bigger than the Gulf, and bigger than any other country. The free flow of trade is a global interest, and no regime should be allowed to hold the world economy hostage like the Iranian regime is doing to the world. Do you really want to know who is driving the violence in the Middle East? Follow the missiles, follow the money, follow the militias, and they all lead back to one place, Iran, or the Islamic regime of Iran. The Iranian regime orchestrates escalation in Lebanon through its proxy, Hezbollah. It attacks Israel through the Houthis in Yemen. And when proxies are not enough, it launches ballistic missiles directly. And this is the pure definition of regional domination strategy. For decades, the regime has pursued an ideological project that extends far beyond Iran's borders, building armed militias and political influence across Arab countries. Look at the results. Lebanon, weakened by Hezbollah. Iraq, struggling with militias' influence. Yemen, devastated by wars. And during the recent war, Iran didn't fire only at Israel. It also threatened and attacked Gulf Arab states, including countries that repeatedly called for dialogue and de-escalation. And that tells you something very important about this war. It is not just about Israel. It's about a regime that seeks power through instability. The people of the Middle East, whether they are Arabs, Persians, Muslims, Christians, Jews, we all deserve peace. We all deserve prosperity and normal lives. And that's why we must be honest about the source of so much regional chaos. The real danger is the ideology of aggression exported by the Islamic regime of Iran.